The casket is mahogany, hand-carved, worth more than most men make in a year. But Frank Lucas isn't looking at the wood, he's looking at the man inside it. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the king of Harlem, dead at 62, heart attack, July 7, 1968. 300 people packed into this funeral home on 116th Street. Gangsters in $1,000 suits, politicians with dirty money in their pockets, cops who've been on the take for decades. And every single one of them is calculating the same equation: when a king dies, somebody takes the throne. They're all looking at the wrong man. Because while Nicky Barnes is shaking hands in his flashy pinstripe suit, while the Italian capos are whispering in the back corner, while the dirty cops are taking notes on who's who, Frank Lucas is standing right beside the body, invisible. Silent. Deadly. Frank hired 12 armed guards for this funeral, not to keep people out, to keep them in, because in exactly 3 minutes, he's going to slip something into that casket that will rewrite the entire American drug trade. Something worth $287,000 Indian $1968, $2.4 million today. It's not money. It's not a gun. It's not a threat. It's 47 pages of handwritten instructions, the complete blueprint for bypassing the Italian mafia, the NIPD, and the federal government, a system so efficient, so invisible, that Frank Lucas will flood the streets with 98% pure heroin, while every other dealer in New York is pushing 30% garbage. But here's the problem. If anyone in this room sees what he's about to do, he's dead before midnight. The Italians will kill him for breaking their monopoly. The Harlem bosses will kill him for disrespecting Bumpy's memory. The cops will kill him to protect their system. Frank Lucas has a choice. Stay small. Stay safe. Die a nobody. Or become the ghost that haunts an empire. He steps forward. The room holds its breath, and Frank Lucas makes the move that will turn him into the most dangerous man America has never heard of. The silent man lives, the loud man dies, and silence is about to become the loudest sound in New York City. Winter sits heavy on Harlem like a debt nobody can pay. February 1968, and the wind off the Hudson cuts through 146th Street like a switchblade, but the real cold is inside apartment 4B, where the king of Harlem is dying one labored breath at a time. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sits propped in his leather throne, the same chair where he's orchestrated 15 years of empire. But empires crumble, and kings fall, and the oxygen tank in the corner hisses every 7 seconds like a countdown clock. His hands shake when he lifts the cognac glass. 62 years old, heart failing. And every gangster in New York can smell the blood in the water. The vultures are circling, but they're looking in the wrong direction. Nicky Barnes is making noise in the South Bronx, flashing diamond rings and talking loud. Guy Fisher is whispering to suppliers in Brooklyn, trying to position himself for the feeding frenzy. But the real predators wear Italian suits and sit in social clubs on Mulberry Street. The Genovese family. They've spent 5 years systematically choking Bumpy's heroin supply lines like a python squeezing prey, and now they're tightening the noose for the kill. It's not a war. It's mathematics. Cold, brutal, efficient mathematics. The Italians control the docks where shipments arrive. They control the importers who move the product. They control the purity levels, cutting 90% pure heroin down to 30% garbage and pocketing the difference. Bumpy Johnson, the legendary king of Harlem, is being forced to sell watered-down poison while the Italians collect 60 cents of every dollar before he even opens his eyes in the morning. They've turned him into a sharecropper on his own land, a mascot wearing a crown with no kingdom underneath it. Frank Lucas stands near the window, 38 years old, watching the street below with ancient eyes. For 15 years, he's been Bumpy's shadow. Driver when movement required invisibility. Enforcer when problems needed permanent solutions. Student when wisdom needed a vessel. Frank doesn't wear flashy suits or drive expensive cars. He doesn't speak unless Bumpy asks a direct question. Loyalty without ego. Hunger without noise. That's what separates Frank from every other soldier in Harlem. The others want to be seen, want to be feared, want to be kings. Frank wants to understand the machinery that makes kings possible. Bumpy gestures weakly, and Frank steps forward. The room smells of medicine, Cuban tobacco, and approaching death. When Bumpy speaks, his voice is damaged, but his mind remains sharp as a straight razor. The Italians are killing us, Frank. Not with bullets, with supply chains. They decide how much we get. They decide how pure it is. They decide if we eat or starve. Frank asks the question that will change American history, so what do we do? Bumpy's lips curl into a skeletal smile. The last real smile Frank will ever see from him. We don't fight the middleman. We eliminate him. From beneath his chair, Bumpy produces a map that looks like it belongs in a Pentagon briefing room. Southeast Asia. Vietnam, Laos, Thailand. The Golden Triangle. His trembling finger traces jungle routes where Chinese chemists refine raw opium into pharmaceutical-grade heroin in labs the French used to control before America arrived with 500,000 soldiers and daily supply flights. The purest heroin on God's earth is cooking in those jungles right now, Bumpy whispers. 98% pure. White as snow. 1 kilo generates the same revenue as 5 kilos of their stepped-on trash. Frank's calculator mind is already running the numbers. But Bumpy isn't finished teaching. The war changed everything. American planes flying daily routes. American military infrastructure moving supplies in and out every single day. You don't need the Italians, Frank. You need the source. And you need a delivery system nobody's watching. What kind of system? Bumpy leans forward, the effort turning his face. This is the final lesson. The secret that separates kings from pawns. The dead don't go through customs. 6 words. Simple, final, revolutionary. Frank understands immediately. Military coffins, flag-draped, sacred, untouchable. Nobody checks a fallen hero coming home. Nobody disrespects the flag. It's not just a smuggling route, it's a ghost highway built on respect and grief. From his robe pocket, Bumpy produces a single folded paper. A name written in careful handwriting. Leslie Ike Atkinson. U.S. Army Sergeant. Frank's cousin. Stationed in Bangkok. You go to the source, Bumpy rasps, pressing the paper into Frank's palm. You build your own supply chain. You cut out every middleman between the poppy field and the street corner. That's how you become invisible and untouchable. A king nobody can see. 3 days later, Bumpy Johnson dies of a heart attack. The king of Harlem is gone. But in a worn leather wallet, a piece of paper waits. A name. A cousin. A door to another world. The mentor is dead. The student becomes the ghost. And the ghost is about to haunt an empire. The heat that July day sits wrong on Harlem. July 7th, 1968, and the temperature outside is pushing 90 degrees, but inside the funeral home on 116th Street, the air conditioning creates a bone-deep cold that makes 300 people shiver in expensive wool. They're packed shoulder to shoulder, creating a suffocating cocktail of cologne, nervous sweat, and calculated ambition. They say they're here to mourn Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, but that's theater. In the underworld, a funeral for a boss isn't a tragedy, it's a job interview conducted over a corpse. The mahogany casket gleams under soft funeral home lighting, hand-carved and worth more than most men earn in 5 years. Inside, Bumpy Johnson lies in his finest suit, hands folded across his chest like a pharaoh prepared for eternity. But this room isn't about the past. It's about the future, and the future is being divided by two distinct species of predator. Near the back wall, the Genovese captains stand like marble statues in $3,000 suits, watching the chaos with heavy-lidded confidence. They own the docks. They control the supply lines. They decide purity levels. To them, Harlem is just a profitable colony, and whoever emerges from this power vacuum will simply be another employee they can squeeze for 60% of every dollar. They're not worried because they believe they own the board, the pieces, and the dice. On the opposite side, the peacocks are already preening. Nicky Barnes works the room in a $5,000 custom suit, diamond pinky ring catching light like a disco ball every time he gestures. His laugh is too loud, his handshake too vigorous, his ambition worn like expensive cologne. Guy Fisher mirrors him from across the aisle. Flash, noise, theater. These men think power is about visibility, about being seen and feared and remembered. They're fighting over scraps of Bumpy's dying empire, measuring drapes while the house burns down. Frank Lucas stands alone, near the front, close enough to touch the casket, far enough to be forgotten. Conservative gray suit from a department store. Black tie. No jewelry. No entourage. He's been in the same position for 20 minutes, and half the room has already stopped registering his existence. That's not an accident, that's architecture. Frank knows what the peacocks and the Italians don't. The old empire is dead. The days of buying watered-down heroin from Italian middlemen are finished. The future isn't in this room. The future is 7,000 miles away in Southeast Asian jungles, and the map to get there is burning against his chest. When the priest begins his eulogy, speaking empty words about charity and community, Frank moves. He approaches the casket during the standard moment for final respects, his movement respectful, unremarkable, invisible. He kneels as if in prayer, head bowed, body blocking the angle from every pew. To the room, it's a picture of loyalty, the faithful driver saying goodbye to his boss. It's actually a transaction. Frank's hand slides inside his jacket with surgical precision. The leather notebook emerges, 47 pages of revolutionary intelligence. Supplier names in Thailand written in Bumpy's careful script. Coordinates of dirt airstrips in Laos. Bribe amounts for customs officials calculated to the dollar. And the crown jewel. Detailed instructions for smuggling pharmaceutical-grade heroin inside military coffins returning from Vietnam. The dead don't go through customs. The dead come home with honor guards and folded flags. The dead are untouchable. In one fluid motion, Frank slides the notebook under Bumpy's folded hands, tucking it between cold fingers and silk lining. 3 seconds. The blueprint disappears into the grave where only Frank knows to dig. From the back wall, Detective Richie Roberts watches with 15 years of instinct screaming warnings. He doesn't see the notebook, the angle is wrong. But he sees intent, purpose, the movement too smooth, too practiced. Roberts pulls out a small notepad and writes a single name, Lucas. He doesn't know why yet, but while everyone else stares at the dead king, the real danger just walked away from the throne. Frank exits alone, unhurried, invisible. Behind him, Nicky Barnes is already talking territory. The Italians are dividing Harlem like diplomats carving up a map. They're all fighting over the past. Frank Lucas is building the future, from the source, with a blueprint buried in a dead man's hands. The revolution doesn't announce itself with gunfire, it begins with silence. And silence is about to become the loudest sound in New York City. Frank Lucas disappears from the concrete grid of Harlem and reappears in the green hell of the Golden Triangle. The plane touches down in Saigon, and the air itself feels weaponized. Heat, diesel, fear, opportunity. July 1968, and Vietnam is consuming 58,000 American lives for a war nobody can explain. But Frank isn't there for politics or patriotism. He's there because chaos creates markets, and war is the most profitable chaos humanity has ever invented. Saigon hits like a fever dream. Helicopters chopping the sky every 30 seconds. Young American soldiers stepping off transport planes with duffel bags and naive eyes. Some will leave in body bags, some will leave as addicts, and a handful will leave rich. Frank moves through the chaos like smoke, asking careful questions, following breadcrumbs left by Bumpy's final instructions. He trades the cold wind of 116th Street for humidity that sticks to your skin like napalm, carrying forged credentials identifying him as a civilian contractor and a dead king's blueprint burning against his chest. 2 days later, he's on a bus heading north to Bangkok, squeezed between farmers and black market traders, watching jungle consume the landscape like a living thing. He finds Leslie Ike Atkinson in a backroom bar near Patpong Road that smells of stale beer, gun oil, and small-time ambition. His cousin, U.S. Army Sergeant, running a hustle moving Rolex watches and Sony electronics through military mail. Ike thinks he's a criminal mastermind because he's making $20,000 a year on the side, laughing too loud, drunk on American whiskey and easy money. Frank watches him for one night and sees amateur hour, stealing crumbs while a bakery burns down around him. In a smoke-stained back room, Frank closes the door and lays out the vision in 15 minutes. No noise from the bar, just two men, distant helicopters, and mathematics that will rewrite American crime. Pharmaceutical-grade heroin purchased directly from source labs. 98% purity. $4,200 per kilogram at the source. By the time it hits Harlem streets, diluted and broken into glassine envelopes, that same kilo generates $300,000 in revenue. No Italian taxes, no French middlemen, just pure profit flowing through blood loyalty. Ike's drunk smile fades. The soldier becomes a businessman, but when he asks how they'll move that much product past Italian-controlled docks and customs, Frank's answer is simple. Cold, absolute, I ain't playing their game. They travel deeper into the Golden Triangle, into regions where maps end and law becomes philosophical. The jungle is biblical, ancient, indifferent, swallowing men whole. They pass through villages where children carry AK-47s and opium smoke drifts like morning fog. In a compound hidden by triple canopy jungle, Frank meets the chemists. Chinese nationals who learned their craft from French colonials before the war changed management. They show him white powder so pure it glows under lamplight, rocket fuel in a world drinking watered-down beer. But buying it is easy, moving it is impossible. Unless you're a ghost with access to the ultimate shield. Frank stands on the military airstrip at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, watching flag-draped coffins being loaded onto transport planes. Aluminum cases. Sacred. Untouchable. Soldiers salute as they pass. Customs agents lower their eyes in respect. Nobody searches a fallen hero. Nobody disrespects the dead. The cadaver connection. Bumpy's final gift weaponized. Frank bribes mortuary support units, sergeants making $300 a month who'll take $5,000 to look the other way. Heroin gets sewn into false bottoms of shipping coffins, hidden beneath the remains of American soldiers. The coffins fly military transport, land at Dover Air Force Base, roll through customs on waves of patriotism and grief. Between 1968 and 1975, Frank Lucas will smuggle over $250 million worth of heroin using this method. Back in Harlem, the product hits like a meteor. Frank brands it blue magic, mysterious, powerful, untraceable. Junkies used to 30% Italian garbage suddenly encounter 98% purity. They overdose not from poison, but from excellence. In the twisted logic of the drug trade, this becomes the best marketing campaign in history. Money pours in like a flood, $1 million a day. But Frank doesn't buy penthouses or Cadillac fleets. He buys a modest house in Teaneck, New Jersey, drives a Chevy, wears J.C. suits. While Nicky Barnes poses for magazine covers as Mr. Untouchable, Frank Lucas controls 80% of Harlem's heroin trade without whispering his own name. He is the invisible man, the silent king, the ghost who haunts an empire. And ghosts, Frank believes, are untouchable. But comfort is slow poison, and the man who thinks he cannot be touched is the man who forgets to keep his guard up. By 1975, Frank Lucas doesn't run a business, he runs a monarchy. $52 million in liquid assets. Property spanning Miami, Detroit, and Puerto Rico. Cash stacked in shoeboxes, trunks, and false walls because banks won't insure that kind of money. His family operation runs with Fortune 500 efficiency. Brothers from North Carolina handling distribution borough by borough. His wife Julie tracking financial flows with ledgers cleaner than most Wall Street firms. Cousin Ike feeding the pipeline from Southeast Asia like a silent artery pumping. Pure profit. The country boys form an impenetrable wall of blood loyalty, cornbread men from backroads Carolina, raised on poverty and discipline, transformed from field hands into millionaires. They don't snitch. They don't steal. They don't talk. Frank built this empire on Bumpy's final lesson: silence, discipline, invisibility. But empires make men forget the rules that built them. The chinchilla coat arrives in a custom box from a Fifth Avenue furrier. Floor length. Honey blonde fur so thick it looks like liquid gold under showroom lights. $125,000 in 1975 money, $650,000 in today's currency. It's not clothing. It's a monument to ego, a declaration that Frank Lucas has transcended the rules governing ordinary criminals. When he tries it on in front of his bedroom mirror, the reflection staring back isn't the disciplined ghost who built an empire in shadows. It's a king who wants the world to see his crown. His wife Julie watches with ancient eyes, her silent, screaming warnings Frank no longer hears. For 7 years, invisibility has been his armor, his religion, his edge. But the empire is heavy, and respect is a drug more dangerous than heroin. He buys the coat. October 1st, 1975. Manila. But the closed-circuit broadcast brings the thriller in Manila to Madison Square Garden, where New York's power elite gathers to watch Ali and Frazier destroy each other in the Philippine heat. Frank Lucas walks into that viewing party wearing the chinchilla coat like a king, entering his throne room. Front row seats among celebrities, politicians, and Italian mob bosses who've spent 7 years trying to identify the ghost who bypassed their monopoly and flooded Harlem with pharmaceutical-grade heroin. Under the bright lights, the coat doesn't just catch attention, it demands it. Every head turns. Every eye calculates. Frank Lucas, the invisible man, just became the most visible person in New York City. Detective Richie Roberts watches from a Newark apartment, beer going warm in his hand as the camera pans across the crowd. The face on screen triggers every instinct developed in 15 years of police work. The man from Bumpy Johnson's funeral. The quiet one. The ghost. Except ghosts don't wear coats worth more than a detective's annual salary. Roberts leans forward, beer forgotten, and asks the question that will destroy everything: who the hell is that guy? Within 48 hours, the NIPT forms a task force. DIA gets involved. FBI opens files. They tap phone lines, follow vehicles, surveil properties in 3 states. What they discover shocks the federal government. Frank Lucas has been operating the largest heroin smuggling operation in American history, moving product through military coffins, generating over $1 million per day, and law enforcement didn't even know his name. While they watched Nicky Barnes pose for magazine covers, the real king sat invisible on a throne they couldn't see. But the Italians saw everything. The Genovese family doesn't send warnings, they send messages written in blood and pain. 2 weeks after the fight, Frank's youngest brother disappears from a South Bronx corner, vanishes like smoke. 3 days later, a package arrives at the Teaneck house. Inside, a severed finger wrapped in butcher paper and a note in careful block letters: "You don't bypass the family." Frank Lucas built his empire on silence, on being the ghost nobody could touch. Now he faces the impossible choice that destroys every king: submit or fight, pay tribute and become an employee of the Italian mob, or go to war with an organization that's been killing people for 2 centuries. Bumpy Johnson would have negotiated. Bumpy would have found the diplomatic solution. But Frank isn't Bumpy. Frank is the man who walked into Southeast Asian jungles and emerged a king. He chooses war. 3 Italian soldiers die in 1 week. Execution style, public. Bodies left as messages, one outside a Mulberry Street social club, one floating in the Hudson with concrete shoes, one in a car trunk in Canarsie. It's the first time Frank Lucas makes noise, and in the underworld, noise is the sound of your own funeral march. The silent man lives. The loud man dies. And Frank Lucas just started screaming. The federal response is swift and merciless. Richie Roberts stands in a conference room with 40 agents, photographs covering every wall like wallpaper, surveillance photos, property records, financial transactions, family trees. The invisible man is suddenly visible from every angle. Roberts circles Frank's photograph with red marker and writes one word underneath: priority. The combined weight of the D, FBI, and NIPT focuses on one target with singular purpose: destroy Frank Lucas. The chinchilla coat cost $125,000. But the real price, the price of visibility, of ego, of forgetting Bumpy's final lesson, is everything Frank Lucas spent 7 years building in shadows. The ghost has become a monster. And monsters are made to be hunted. The end of an empire doesn't sound like an explosion. It sounds like a battering ram hitting solid oak at 6 in the morning. January 28, 1976. The sky over Teaneck, New Jersey, bruised purple with dawn when the world crashes into Frank Lucas's living room. The task force hits like Judgment Day: 40 federal agents and windbreakers, DIA specialists, FBI hunters who've been tracking a ghost for 18 months since a chinchilla coat made the invisible man visible. They rip through drywall, tear up floorboards, ransack the suburban dream that camouflaged an empire. In the attic insulation, they find $584,000 in cash, stacks wrapped in rubber bands, smelling of old money and new crimes. Frank stands in pajamas and handcuffs, watching his kingdom dissolve in real time. His wife Julie screams as they drag her away. 4 brothers hit the driveway with boots on their necks. 15 country boys lieutenants arrested simultaneously across 3 states. The organization built on blood loyalty and Carolina discipline crumbles in a single morning. The chinchilla coat hangs upstairs like evidence of the vanity that burned everything down. Frank Lucas, the man who bypassed the mafia and outmaneuvered the U.S. Army, reduced to a booking number in the system. In the federal holding cell, Detective Richie Roberts slides a folder across cold metal. Inside, the mathematics of Frank's future. 70 counts. Life without parole. Frank will die in concrete, forgotten, while the world spins on. But Roberts offers salvation with a price tag. Cooperation. If Frank testifies against corrupt NIPD officers and DEA agents on his payroll, not his brothers, not his blood, but the dirty badges who made this empire possible, the sentence becomes negotiable. Frank must become the one thing Bumpy Johnson taught him never to be: a rat. The internal war is mythological. Frank hears Bumpy's ghost whispering from 1968, "The silent man lives. The loud man dies. Never talk to the law." For 20 years, rat has been the dirtiest word in Frank's vocabulary. The ultimate sin. The unforgivable weakness. But silence won't save him anymore. The chinchilla coat destroyed his invisibility. The war with Italians destroyed his safety. Now the law has destroyed his empire. Frank faces the oldest choice in criminal history: die with honor in a cage, or live as the thing you despise. He chooses survival. The ghost begins to sing. Frank names 75 corrupt cops. He details payoffs, bribes, protection rackets with surgical precision. He destroys officers who made $35,000 annually, but drove cars worth $150,000. Detectives with Rolex watches and beach houses on government salaries. His testimony triggers the largest police corruption scandal in New York history, bigger than Serpico, wider than anyone imagined. The Special Investigations Unit implodes, careers incinerate, pensions evaporate. Men who thought themselves untouchable learn that nobody survives when empires fall. Frank's life sentence becomes 15 years. He serves 7. Released in 1981, he tries legitimate business, nightclubs, real estate. Everything fails because once you've made $1 million daily selling death, minimum wage feels like drowning. In 1984, federal agents catch him rebuilding the network, trading ounces instead of kilos. Another arrest, another 7 years in a cage. When Frank Lucas walks free in 1991, he's 61. Broke. Forgotten. The country boys scattered to graves and prisons. Blue magic is urban legend. The cadaver connection is myth. The man who once bought pharmaceutical-grade heroin directly from Golden Triangle chemists now collects Social Security in a Newark apartment. The king becomes a ghost, but this time invisibility isn't power, it's erasure. Frank Lucas dies May 30th, 2019, at 88 years old, alone in a New Jersey nursing home. No empire, no fortune, no country boys standing guard. The nurses changing his bedpans don't know they're caring for a legend. The other residents eating pudding don't know they're sitting beside the ghost who rewrote American crime. But the blueprint he slipped into Bumpy Johnson's casket in 1968 changed everything forever. It proved the mafia didn't control the drug trade, intelligence did. It proved one man, silent and disciplined, could bypass any system, rewrite any monopoly. Every cartel that followed, every kingpin who studied the game, learned from Frank's revolution: control the source, eliminate middlemen, stay invisible until you can't. The final question echoes across 50 years of consequences: was the throne worth the price of the crown? Frank Lucas sat on that throne for 7 years and spent the next 44 paying for it. He built an empire generating hundreds of millions. He died broke and alone. He became a legend. He ended forgotten. He proved one man could change everything. He finished with nothing. Frank never answered that question, but every morning for 44 years, he woke up knowing the answer. And silence, in the end, was the only truth he had left.